Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm here Harpreet Singh with a daily analysis of the Hindu from 16th of October 2024. Let's begin today's analysis. So this is a Telegram account where you can basically find this particular PDF, which you can use it for studying. Along with it, a lot of material is available, which will help you in your preparation. So what all topics we have taken for today's analysis? First, the North Sea route, relevant with respect to GS2. World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly that is taking place in New Delhi right now, relevant with respect to GS2 and GS3. Topic of inflation. Next, we have the editorial regarding the World Food Day. Now, please understand, though the World Food Day editorials have come, not one editorial is there, but multiple editorials are there. So, we have taken up two editorials rather than one today. And we'll be seeing the dimensions what the writers are basically telling us with respect to food access, pricing, and other dimensions associated with that. So after that, we have the dimension of news in shorts. That is basically specific to the prelim examination, which helps you for your prelims. And along with that, we have the MCQs for your prelims practice. Let's begin today's analysis. So just have a look over here. This is the North Sea route. You can very well see this Northern Sea route. Now, why is it in the news? Why is it in the news? Please see. The recent meeting of the India-Russian Working Group on the Northern Sea Route, NSR, marks a significant step in enhancing the cooperation with respect to the Arctic shipping. Now, see if this sea route is also available for, let us say, transport and trade, that will be helpful for India as well. And if Russia and India are cooperating on that, that will be helpful for boosting the trade and commerce relationships, not only with Russia, but also the other countries surrounding the region. So this is again an alternative route. That is why we realize that it becomes significant with respect to the international ties, trade and commerce. Now please, let's see ahead. We've already seen this particular diagram. We see that the Northern Sea route is the shortest shipping route connecting Europe and Asia Pacific. Now, see, being shortest, it definitely means that it is going to save a lot of fuel, save a lot of time, and obviously there are goods which are, let us say, perishable in nature, which you see most of the times when even they are transported, let us say, exported from one region to another, large amount of gets decayed, or let's say inferior in quality because of the distance that is being taken to reach the product to that particular destination. So we are going to save on all these. And that is why it is beneficial for India as well as Russia and obviously the other countries who are stakeholders to this. So shortest route between Europe and Asia Pacific, spanning approximately 5,600 kilometers through the 4 Arctic seas. And what is the route? See, it begins at the Kara Strait between the Barents and then ends at the Bering Strait. Now please understand, what are the benefits over here? We realize that Northern Sea route can reduce the transit distance by up to 50% compared to the traditional route like that via the Suez Canal. Now just see the existing route. It is going to decrease the distance by 50%, and this is going to be helpful for India also. In that case, in, let us say, boosting relationships with other countries. So this is a very positive way ahead, which we are basically focusing on the dimensions of having alternative trade routes, boosting trade relationships. That is one of the key ingredient of the India's foreign policy and the international relation level. So as we move ahead, next topic, the 5th Global Standards Symposium, GSS 24. Now see, remember that this is going on from the 14th till 24th of October. What the outcome is going to be, we'll see around 24th. We will be again taking up this discussion and seeing what has the outcome been. But till now, we should just have an idea of what is basically going on. Now see, there's something written as International Telecommunication Union, under whose aegis the World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly is taking place. That is ITU WTSA 24, the short form for all these terms that are written. Now, this is taking for the first time in Asia Pacific. 190 plus countries are participating. 3,000 plus global leaders and experts are here and focusing on the latest trends and technologies that are going on around the world. Now, let's see. It was organized by the International Telecommunication Union, and with respect to India, hosted by the Department of Telecommunication. Now, focus is on setting or the role of international standards. So really what happens is when these meetings and symposiums are held, there are certain standardizations that have to be set with respect to the new technology that is basically coming up, whether it is AI, whether it is new forms of digital communication. So what they do is standards are set, so those standards would be adopted by the countries and a uniform standardization would be there across the world. That is why these symposiums, these meetings become very, very important. And role focus on the international standards. This is what is the basic emphasis. We'll see the other dimensions also. See, before we go ahead, again, what becomes important is over here we saw International Telecommunication Union. Now, in the UPSC examination, you can very well be asked, what is ITU? That is why, little idea of that. ITU is a specialized agency. Again, please remember, not an organ, a specialized agency. These words become very important. Of the United Nations, responsible for issues related to information and communication technology. Right? Specialized agency first. Next was established in 1865, one of the oldest international organizations. What are its functions? See, setting global standards for telecommunication to ensure seamless communication. Let us assume that I want to call someone in the United States, right? If we do not have a commonality with respect to those digital technologies, with respect to the telecommunication mediums, supposingly there will going to be issues. Even calling someone else in another country. So having those standardizations become very important, right? Next, allocating radio frequencies and managing the global satellite orbits, fostering international cooperation, and promoting access to the information and communication technologies to the developing countries so that the gap that is there between the developed and the developing is basically filled and they all come at approximately an equal platform. Next, the headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. ITU members, governments, private sector entities, academic institutions across the world. Currently, 194 members are there. Now, please remember, in the examination can also be asked, it has only the member countries who belong to particular government. No, it has private entities also. It can have scholars, academicians also as members. So these are certain things that you need to keep in mind. Now, key themes of this meeting that is basically going on. What are those key themes? See, the international standards. Symposium emphasized that international standards are not merely technical guidelines, but also moral compasses. How come moral compass? Supposingly, if certain standardizations are set in such a way that is beneficial for the developed countries and not for the developing, then what will happen? It will go against the principle of humanity itself. That means you're favoring certain countries and going against the ones who actually need more assistance. So that means standardizations should be such that not only begin or bring in a set of international level guidelines that are basically followed and adopted by the countries, but also along with it, they have to take it into consideration that there are a lot of developing countries which also have to adopt the standards. So we cannot be treating them as a way that they are someone who have to be neglected. So the standardizations that are created, they have to be kept in mind that they are also for the least developed and the developing countries as well. That is why the word moral compass has also been used over here. Next, digital transformations, critical role of the standards as newer and newer technologies are coming up, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, all these things are coming up. We realize that certain standardizations with respect to these technologies are also important. That is why what happens? These are over here setting those standards or coming to a consensus on those standards that should be adopted. That is why role of standards again. Artificial intelligence and emerging technologies, these are again a point of talk and discussion because all these things are more or less surrounding these dimensions. You will be seeing in this over here also latest digital solutions, AI innovative solutions and more. This is the topic of discussion per se in this particular symposium that is taking place. Next is bridging the standards gap, again between the developed and the developing and the least developed countries. So the lesser developed, the least developed and the developing countries are also aided in what ways they can basically adopt the standardization. So that we very well know that development of information and communication technologies plays a very important role in the development of a country. In the developing and the least developing countries, least developed countries, you'll be seeing that they lag a lot behind the ones which are developed. And that is why ICT, the information and communication technology, can basically help their economies to grow. And that is where these symposiums aid a lot. So let's move ahead. Next is high-level dialogues, discussions on future innovations and digital transfer infrastructure. Next is open source softwares. That means which are easily available. That means the source code of the software is available to the people. Those are open source softwares. So again, discussion on more of open source software again has been emphasized over here. Next topic is inflation. Now this has been in news for the past 2 days. That is why it has been taken over here. The retail inflation reaches 9 months high in September, from 3.65% in August to 5.49 in September. Now this itself is something that when you see your plate, you can see the composition of the plate and reflect how the inflation is being marked, especially for those who are in the vulnerable section, lower classes, lower middle classes. We see immediately their food composition on the plate itself changes once these inflation rises, because it takes out certain components of the food from their platter. And that again will impact their food, their diet, their nutrition component again. So these are all related to each other because today is a World Food Day. That is why these things again become relevant. Okay. Now, before we go ahead, let us understand what the topic of inflation basically, or concept of inflation means. See, inflation refers to rise in the prices of most goods and services of daily or common use, such as food, clothing, housing, recreation, transport, consumer staples, and etc. I'll give you an example. Supposingly, you have to go to the market and buy certain potatoes, right? On a general day, when you are buying, let us say in one last week, supposingly, you go and you see that the trend is, let us assume, hypothetically, 30 rupees a kg. Let us assume. This week, when you are going and buying the same thing, you see there the vendor over says it is 60 rupees now. Now the problem would be, how come from 30 to 60, how come the price has become double for per kg of, let us say, potatoes? Similarly, after that, you said, okay, I will buy half a kg only because it is expensive. What you do after that, you go to some other shop. You had been buying certain, let us say, clothing stuff, right? What used to be the price has now increased. What do you realize? You realize that all the articles we generally use, there is a rise in the prices of those articles and entities. Now you say the overall, overall aspect of rise in the prices of the goods, or most of the goods is seen. Not all, but most of the goods would be seen. Now you see that means there is some inflation. Now your income has not increased to as per the proportion in which the prices are rising. So that is why what happens? You see the value of money is in a way decreasing, because within the 1 month you are getting the same salary only, but the price of those entities, what is going on, is increasing. That means the value of money is decreasing. That means inflation hurts you two ways. Firstly, the article's cost is increasing and the value of the money in a way is decreasing. So it is like a double slap. That is why we realize that inflation refers to the rise in the prices of the most goods for daily or common use, such as foods, transport, recreation, housing, and even the consumer staples. Now, please understand this. It measures the average price change in the basket of commodities and services over time. What do you mean by basket? There are certain entities which are taken as reference point, which would be taken in order to calculate. We'll be seeing that also. Not every entity and every place the people can go and take out the prices. So there are certain places which are taken as sample. And along with it, there's certain stuff which is basically taken as a reference point from those basket of goods, and then we calculate it. Because we cannot go and basically ask to go to every mandi and every place and ask the price of every entity and article. That is impossible. So there's a reference points basically seen through which we can analyze that certain inflation is there or overall rise in the prices has been observed. Now please understand, how do we measure inflation? Now, inflation is measured through various means and types depending upon what is the requirement. Now please see here. First is the Consumer Price Index. Now, the Consumer Price Index CPI measures the change in the retail prices of goods and services with reference to the base year. So, what are the changes that are taking place with respect to the goods and services at the retail level? Now, because it is consumer centric, so we are the ones who are basically observing it also. Now, it is compiled by the National Statistical Office under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. There are various types depending upon what type of sector one is employed in also. CPI for industrial workers compiled by the Labor Bureau, base year is 2016. CPI for the rural laborers and agricultural labor is compiled by Labor Bureau, base year is 86-87. New CPI, urban, rural and urban combined, this is base year is 2012. Now compiled and published by Central Statistical Organization at all the level for India, all India level. Now, when we see this, there are the weights on the basis of points. Let us say food and beverages, this much weightage has been given, housing this much, fuel this much, clothing and footwear this much, pan, tobacco this much, miscellaneous this much. So when we have the prices of, let us say, of certain articles, and next time when we see what is the price increase, we use that component, and based on the weightage, we use the statistical formulas to calculate what the inflation is. Now, this is again, the weightage becomes very important. In the examination, you can be asked what has, let us say, largest amount of weightage, food and beverages. Then next you have housing and all. So you should have a brief idea of these things again. So Consumer Price Index. Next is the Consumer Food Price Index. Now, this is a sub-component of the Consumer Price Index, measuring the changes in the retail price of the food items consumed by the population. So basically checking whether the food prices are increasing or not, very specific with respect to the CPI. Now, it tracks the prices of the food staples such as cereals, vegetables, fruits, dairy, meat and all. Now, please see, compiled by the Central Statistical Office, CSO, under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Now it is named as NSO since 2019. The base year is 2012, methodology calculated monthly. Now, please see, this was the retail. Remember that Consumer Price Index and the Consumer Food Price Index basically talks about the retail, because something that we are buying at that level. Next is a wholesale market. Now, Wholesale Price Index, it measures the average change at the wholesale prices before the retail level. Now, then you can compare the wholesale price. If the price is very high, then automatically it will impact the Consumer Price Index also. So we get a brief estimate. This is at the consumer level, because we are the ones who are buying from the retail shops or vendors. This is directly what is impacting us. This is at the wholesale level. Now, at the wholesale level, what the inflation is through the Wholesale Price Index. It covers only goods. It excludes the services. These are very important. It can be asked in your prelims. See, over here we see goods and services both are basically taken into consideration, because see, all the sectors are here. Over here in wholesale, only goods are taken, not services. Compiled by the Office of the Economic Advisor, Ministry of Commerce on a monthly basis. Base year is 2012-13. Weightages assigned to the commodities are based on production value. Now, please understand that this is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This is under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. This is where people can get confused. They should be aware of that. Okay. Now, please see what are the highlights of the report that have come up. It has basically seen that the food inflation, Consumer Food Price Index, we see has surged to 9.29%. Housing and electricity inflation rose to 2.78%. One of the major reasons that has been cited over here is the adverse weather conditions. Now, what happens is that the demand is a lot, supply is less. So when you have the demand supply gap, automatically the prices also rise. That is why adverse weather conditions very often lead to what? Scarcity of certain goods, but the demand remains high. What happens is that you will see an escalation in the prices whenever certain climate vagaries or problems of climate come. Decline in the specific categories, we see that there have been decline in certain specific categories. I told you earlier also, when we take a basket of goods, it is not necessary that the price of every article or entity is going to increase. There would be some in which the inflation might decrease, in some it might increase, because this depends upon the demand that is being made, what the consumer are consuming. Let us take an example. If the Navratris are going on, if the Shraddhs are going on, you'll be seeing that the demand for meat will decrease. The demand of the meat will decrease, so possibly the inflation in those things will also decrease. On the other hand, in other days, it might increase. So demand supply things also basically results in such changes. So we see that inflation fell for pulses, spices, meat and fish, and sugar and confectionery. So these are certain sectors where inflation drop was observed, right? Okay, let's move ahead. Now this is very interesting because we are going to take not one editorial but two editorials with respect to the World Food Day. Now please remember, World Food Day, not Food Day, it's a food day to be more precise. World Food Day becomes very, very important is because yesterday only we discussed about the Global Hunger Index. We saw India's rank as 105 among the 127 countries. We are seeing the level of hunger across the world, the deficit, whether it is respect to the production, whether it is respect to the accessibility, whether it is respect to the affordability, a lot of crisis is being faced. This is not only because of one factor, but multiple factors, whether it is political issues are going on, whether we see that climatic changes are taking place, whether we see crops being destroyed because of the climatic changes, whether we see certain regions like Middle East, a lot of, let us say, war-like conditions between the countries are going on. So we see a lot of issues with respect to hunger also being observed at a global level, along with it India. So what we need to see is that today is the World Food Day, 16th of October. A brief idea why it is celebrated and the concerned authority, and then we will be going on to the certain articles that we have taken, because we had covered some part of it in the previous editorial of the Global Hunger Index, but we will be again seeing certain dimensions of that. Let's see. See, the World Food Day, why is it celebrated? See, it is celebrated, the World Food Day is celebrated on 16th of October to commemorate the establishment of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in the year 1945. So you can see that this is celebrated because United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization was basically established on this particular day. What is FAO? Again, remember, it is a specialized agency of United Nations that leads international effort to combat hunger. That means it is working towards how the countries can get free of the problem of hunger. Focus is on sustainable development goals. We very well know that sustainable development goal number 2 basically aims for zero hunger by 2030. Now, which, as we will see in the editorials, is a distant dream right now, looking at the conditions of the various countries. The theme of 2024 is, for the World Food Day, is right to food for a better life and a better future. Again, these themes become important for your prelims examination. They will be asking, because these all topics are very important for your prelims as well as mains. So what is it? Right to food for a better life and a better future is a theme for 2024 World Food Day. Why it is organized or celebrated? Because United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization on 16th of October basically was formed in 1945. Clear? So we know a brief background of this with respect to the World Food Day. Now coming to the editorial section. Here. A food sufficient India needs to be hunger free too. This is something very interesting topic. When we talk about the food that is available, we see that we are exporting food also. We have a lot of buffer stock also that is present here. We have the production of food there, whatever necessities are there that can be imposed, but we are self-sufficient. This is something that we observe. But does it mean that we are free of hunger? No. Because a very ironic statement is that merely having or consuming food does not mean that you are consuming healthy food. Does not mean that you have the necessary nutrients. Doesn't mean that you have the necessary micronutrients and the vitamins. That is what is known as hidden hunger also. That is why do you realize sometimes if you are consuming a lot of food, your stomach might be full, but is it meeting the requirements of the nutrients that are required by your body? No. I'll give you an example. Supposingly my weight is 100 kgs, right? So I need at least 100 grams of proteins every day. Now, if I'm consuming one bowl of dal, it has one simple, a normal bowl of dal. It mainly has, let us say what, 6 to 7 grams of proteins. One egg has basically what, 6 to 7 again grams of 5 to 6 grams of proteins. Do you realize that every day, what is the requirement of the body is not being met? Those 100 grams per day. Then we need to realize that we see the food eating with respect to just filling our tummy and getting it full. And we assume that we have consumed food. But no. Merely having the quantity, that is a problem, first of all. In certain cases, many people still do not have the access and affordability. That is one issue. If you have also, do you realize that you're having the correct food, correct diet, balanced diet? No. That is why the topic over here is a food sufficient India needs to be hunger free too. So let us see what the topic is basically talking about and see what we can pick up out from this. See, the initial paragraph, ending hunger, foods insecurity, is basically mentioned over here, is aimed by the Sustainable Development Goal, basic number 2, which aims at zero hunger, which we had basically seen over here also. So we see that the writer basically mentions that the aim is to end hunger by 2030, where the Sustainable Development Goals need to be achieved by all the countries. So in that, it is goal number 2, zero hunger. So there should be no hunger across the world. Now, what the writer says that this is something very difficult. Why? From the reality, due to the rising conflicts, we see the conflicts rising across the world, Middle Eastern region and other parts. We see that climate change is there. We see economic slowdown and food deficits regions are there. And this is increasing. The conflicts are increasing. The climate change, you saw just now, the cyclones hitting Florida. We saw repeated cyclones coming up in the regions of the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. Earlier on, Arabian Sea was something known for not a large number of cyclones. But how is it increasing? Because the temperature of the Arabian Sea is increasing. What happens? The regions that were previously unaffected by the climate vagaries now are being impacted. So all the agricultural aspects, the economic activities there across the coast will also be impacted. So what is being said over here is that these things are basically impacting the goal that we have with respect to the zero hunger. Now, see, when we see with respect to the farmers, we realize that close to 80% are small and marginal farmers. They have small patches of land. If certain rainfall happens, certain, let us say, cloudburst happens, certain, let us say, hailstorm happens, they're completely destroyed. Because their land sizes, land holding is so small. That is why we don't have to see it from the perspective of the larger farmers simply, but majority of them are small and marginal farmers. That is what creates an issue. So let's see. Now, over here, we realize that after having mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goals and the issue that is basically impacting due to the various problems rising, we realize that food insecurity and malnourishment is due to the lack of access and affordability. Again, understand. They're saying that the food insecurity, again, even in India and across the world, again, the topics remain the same, that lack of access or the food being unaffordable. Unaffordable, basically, please understand, simply consuming food of the price that is provided to you might be filling your tummy, but can you afford that healthy diet that is required? The necessary amount of macro and micronutrients that are required, can you afford that? No. That is what is being told over here. So when we move over here, as we move, we'll be seeing that merely having adequate food does not mean getting a balanced diet. This is again a very important dimension. If you are consuming food, you can afford something that will fill your tummy, but not the food that will give you a balanced diet. This is what the writer is trying to say. This is something you need to decipher. For example, if I need X amount of protein, X amount of carbohydrates and fats and X amount, whatever be the case, I might be consuming something which will fill my tummy, but is it those exact amount of food, or in, let us say, grams that is required by my body. Am I giving the body that amount? No. That is unaffordable for majority of the population in India, because that would basically, they cannot afford it. That is again a concern. Next is, the writer over mentions about the lack of the purchasing capacity. He says that globally undernourished people, according to the 2024 repeat of the Global Hunger Index, also we see 757 million, close to 10% of the population. Now, just imagine across the world, 757 million people are basically undernourished or facing the undernourishment. Now see, as we move ahead, the certain statistics that were mentioned over here. He says that 20.4% of people in Africa are facing hunger issues. In Asia, 8.1%, Latin America, 6.2%. Along with it, he says that Africa right now is facing the issue of 20.4% hunger issues, but that will rise to 50% by 2030. Just imagine. That means the condition of Africa is going to deteriorate day after day, because poverty already is there. Conflicts based on religion and, let us say, ethnicity is there, based on tribal identity is there. Along, they have been become as a playfield for larger powers also. And their societal aspects, which were traditionally balanced with the ecosystem and the environment, have been destroyed during the time of colonization. Now, what we see is an outcome of the climatic changes that further impacting them and the conditions deteriorating. And along with it, because of the malnourishment and all, newer types of diseases that are coming up, which are further impacting their civilization. And we see other dimensions, issues of urban-rural divide and gender divide. Please understand, there is a marked difference in the nutrition, or let us say undernourishment, between man and female, along with rural and urban. The urban people over here, you'll be seeing, are suffering from the fact of obesity. Obviously, there is urban poverty also. But if you see, overall trend is towards what? Obesity. Now, on the other hand, with respect to the rural region, we see that there is accessibility of problem, affordability problem of the balanced diet issues. In both the regions, in the urban regions, because again what they are consuming is unhealthy, so there is still lack of the balanced diet, and still the burden on the diseases will increase. In the rural region itself, because of the affordability and accessibility issue, they are not able to afford the balanced diet, and that is why they are creating a problem. Because in urban regions, we consume junk food, large number, and that is continuously increasing. Next is a COHD, cost and affordability of a healthy diet. Now, this is something very interesting. What is the cost and can you afford a healthy diet? That is COHD. Now, that is something very interesting. Over here, we realize that overall, we will be seeing that, again, same thing, that this cost itself is very high. Why? Because this is based on what the body's requirement for the nutrition, macro and micronutrients are, which if not met, creates a problem. So as we move ahead, we will be realizing overall, we see that across the world, COHD has little decreased as certain recent reports. But in the regions like Africa and Latin America, it is continuously increasing. That means their situation is aggravating day by day. As we move ahead in this region, we realize that the concept of thalinomics is mentioned. Thalinomics, what does it mean? You'll be realizing that states like Dravidian states like Tamil Nadu and all, they have had the concept of a balanced diet thali very affordable. Let us say there was a concept of Amma Thalis, Amma Kitchen. There are, let us say, 5 rupees, and you can eat a quantum amount of rice and dal, and along the other sabji that is there. Now, this is important from the perspective there, the state governments are basically coming up. The reason behind it is that people cannot afford at those level. And when they at least are getting that food, that is basically helping them to meet their nutritional aspects. So thalinomics aspect, again, has been said as a positive way forward, that is basically helping a large segment of the society. Along with it, it's mentioned over here, in the rural regions, 63.3% of the people are unable to afford the cost of required diet. Please remember, there is something known as a healthy balanced diet, but something basically what is necessary for the diet for you to sustain. 63% of the people are not able to afford the required diet. Leave the healthy diet aside. Cost of a required diet, something that is important for your sustenance. 63.3% cannot even afford that. How will they afford the aspect of a healthy or a balanced diet cost? COHD. How will they afford COHD when they cannot afford CORD? Now, we realize that along with it, we realize that there is a rapid rise in the unhealthy eating. In the urban region, it is junk food. We all know it like a modern day poison. In the rural region also, we realize that this thing is infiltrating. Now, double problem that is arising is, on one hand, you are not able to afford a balanced or a healthy diet. On the other hand, what are we seeing? We are seeing that the people are basically consuming that diet which is already very unhealthy, which is going to further deteriorate their health. With respect to this, we realize that in the end, there is mentioning about the global hunger index also. Now, yesterday we had covered this. You saw that India, we have already covered these definitions. You would have seen that. We've already covered this definition the previous day also. What is undernourished, what is stunted, what is wasted, and what is the under child 5 mortality. We see undernourished 13.7, stunted 35.5, wasted 18.7, under 5 mortality 2.9. Now, these are something which is observed. The actual situation might be more grave. So over here, he mentions about the global hunger index report that we had discussed the previous day, yesterday only. And that is why he said a comprehensive solution towards this problem is the need of the hour, where concepts like thalinomics, concept like necessary intervention by the government at the local level, community level work is very important if you want to resolve these issues. Along with it, the actually auditing your schemes that are there, let us say Poshan Abhiyan. Then we realize that we have the program for the iron folic capsules, but in spite of that, we realize that close to 52% of the women in India are suffering from anemia. So why this is happening? So proper auditing of these mechanisms become very, very important. This is what the editorial basically talks about. If we move ahead, the second is food access is about equitable agri-food system. Over here, what he's talking about, let me tell you in brief that he said food system, if you want to basically improve the food access, the agricultural system also needs to improve with it, because agriculture and food are basically linked to each other in every way. That is why he's telling about the aspects of agriculture and what things are impacting the agriculture. Because if you see vagaries of climate change that impact agriculture, that will automatically lead to the, let us say, poverty among the agricultural or the farmers. Along with it, reduce the supply and the shortage of food will be there. Inflation will rise and most of the people will not be able to afford it. Along with it, we realize that according to the Ministry of Agriculture, the monthly income of a farmer is approximately 10,500 rupees. 10,500 rupees. We know that an MRI itself costs rupees 16,000. So a farmer on an average in India cannot afford even an MRI. That is why we say any vagaries of climate change and all basically leads to a crisis of poverty or a severe case of poverty among them. So what is being linked over here is the sector of agriculture and food and how they are related to each other. As we move ahead in the initial part, they're basically talking about what is the World Food Day and what is the reason it is being celebrated, that we have already done. Then we realize that they're talking about, again, the statistics of the hungry people, which we had done over here, which we saw that 757 million people are undernourished, hungry in India, across the world, which we have already done. Then the writer moves ahead and talks about the Green Revolution. He talks about Green Revolution and how a country that was dependent upon the imports from countries like United States became self-sufficient because of the Green Revolution practices took place. So writer now starts to move towards and makes us realize that how the improvement in the agriculture and the agriculture sector itself basically led to the aspect of food being on the plates of the people or citizens of India. So we emphasized on the Green Revolution aspect. Then over here, he again talks about the National Food Security Act 2013, which basically provides ration to 80 crore people in India. Now see, if we do not have enough, let us say, production of agriculture products, what will happen? we will not be able to meet these targets also. So that is why improvement in the agriculture sector is closely linked to the food accessibility and affordability itself. Along with it, we realized that government few days back had basically stated that the continuation of the fortified rice will continue, because that is again required for solving the issue of the malnourishment among the people. So as we move ahead over here, now he directly comes to the challenges of the agriculture sector. And over here, he is basically focusing that these are the challenges of agriculture sector which need to be worked out in order to solve the issue of the food system also. So firstly, he mentions about 82% are small and marginal farmers. So we have very small land holding. That is why the government is continuously working on collective farming, cooperative farming, because over there, people cooperate together to, let us say, resolve the issue. So we realize that if the farmers or land holding is very less, there is a lot of insecurity among the farmers, and any case of climate change or certain losses that take place, that basically makes the farmer again in a lot of under the burden of lot of loans and debt. And then in various cases, we see in the regions of Andhra Pradesh, that is where rise of suicides among the farmers in Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra for that matter, because of these reasons, because the farmers over there are very small landholders. And because of the loan along with it, and they are not able to have a saving in any form along with it, we realize that they're not even able to feed their families. We realize this is a major grave challenge, because that completely destroys the cycle of food production, going to the market, selling it, gaining money, and that being supplied to the other consumers. That cycle is disrupted. As we move ahead, we realize that resource degradation. Over here it's mentioned that we need to resolve the problem of the resource degradation that is taking place currently in the agriculture sector. For example, in the regions of Punjab and Haryana, exploitation of the groundwater is a major concern, right? People feel that the larger amount of, or the more amount of water that they put in the field is good. Repeated exploitation, that is why the water level tables are decreasing and a lot of problems are arising, because we see that exploitation of the resources at last is going to impact the agriculture production in the long term. That is why we see the productivity and production in the Punjab and Haryana has been decreasing over the time because of the exploitation of the resources. So this again is a challenge to the agriculture sector, directly linked to the food and the food system. Next is the market access. Now we realize that market reforms are something that is being coined repeatedly by the government of India. They realize that more market options should be available. People, the farmers should have the probability, or let us say the option of going to the private markets also, having, let us say, interacting with them, selling them at their own prices. So we need market reforms, that is being again mentioned by the writer with respect to the agriculture sector. Next are the issue of rural poverty. We realize that rural poverty is a major concern in India, where when the people are facing, the families are facing the issue of poverty, the aspect of innovation within the agriculture sector is close to none. If they are rural poor, because they are either landless, or let us say the marginal farmers, or even the small farmers for that matter. So the land holding is so less that they, even if they want, cannot put, let us say, innovative technologies, or let us say better seeds also for that matter, because then they have to come and, let us say, supply good amount of water through irrigation facilities that are not going to be available there. So we realize that rural poverty again has a major problem. First, it will restrict those farmers from putting some innovative technology to raise the productivity in production, one. Second, the thing is that over there, once this does not happen, repeatedly the productivity will decrease. Third, in the long term, they tend to sell their land or mortgage their land, and later on they become casual laborers. Fourth, the problem that again arises is that these people, because of the debt and the limited amount of resources, they are not able to feed their families also in a proper way. So issue of undernourishment and malnourishment are prevailing among these families also. Next is the issue of climate change. We realize that climate change is basically impacting the productivity and production of your farms. You realize that destruction of large scale and acres, hundreds of acres of farmland in regions of Haryana, in even regions of, let us say, Maharashtra, where, let us say, hailstorm and a very, let us say, very high intensity rainfall happens. What does that happen? For those when the larger farms possibly can sustain themselves, but when those with a lower or smaller, let us say, area, let us say with the smaller marginal farmers, they are completely destroyed. Right to food goes beyond agriculture. Now, next thing that they're mentioning over here is right to food goes beyond agriculture. Please understand, simply having the right to food is fine. That is being through the National Food Security Act 2013. It is a right. But it is also mentioning that, again, the similar thing that is mentioned in the previous article, is it nutritious enough? Is everybody able to access it? Even if those people who are eating, is there some corruption being there? Does it basically resolve the problem of the healthy diet that is being consumed by people? No. So what they're saying is this concept includes not only the structural change in the agriculture, it also needs basically emphasis on the lot of social sector upliftment and development at the rural level also, because people, the rural level, we realize that are facing issues of caste system, issues of class system, multiple dimensions along with poverty. So we realize that these right to food beyond agriculture dimension, it is a community led aspect that needs to be there, where community needs to come together and basically help each other at a ground level. Because government can help, aid, yes, to a certain extent, to a great extent for that matter also. But if you see that there is poverty, there are certain issue, people who need help, it is important that those who have should help the others. That is why we talk about collective system. Along with it, PDS reforms and better infrastructure needs to be there. That is also mentioned over here. So these are what the topics that were discussed with respect to the food system, right? News in shorts. So over here, the President of India basically has gone to visit the country over here in Algeria. So we basically have seen that this is the first time that the Indian president has visited the country. A little bit facts about Algeria, because if the president has visited there, you can be asked anything in prelims. So Algeria is Africa's largest country and 10th largest country in the world. It has two regions, Tel in the north, which is influenced by the Mediterranean, and Sahara in the south, which is mostly desert. Approximately 90% of the Algeria is desert. From the cultural aspect, Arab world is a part of the Arab world in a way, and Islamic heritage is there. Along with it, we see the climate is Mediterranean climate in the north and warmer in the south. Languages over here is the Arabic and Tamizite. French and English are also spoken. Currency is dinar. This is a map which basically shows its neighboring countries: Tunisia, Libya, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, Morocco. So these are the ones which are basically neighboring it. Along with it, you have the Mediterranean Sea in the north. So you should know these things because this can be asked in your papers. Yeah. MCQs, please pause the video and see the question. Attempt the question. Pause the video, 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 attempt the question. These are your answers over here. Hopefully, you would have done. So this was the analysis of the Hindu from today's paper. Hopefully, you enjoyed the news, the editorials that we had taken up, the news in shorts, and along with the MCQs to make it a comprehensive package of your daily current affairs. Take care, God bless, and as we always say at the end, Jai Hind.